Few surprises in USDA cattle reports. The U.S. cattle herd is known to cycle through periods of expansion and contraction roughly every 10 years or so. Higher feed prices contributed to one of those contraction phases, with beef cow numbers reaching a low in 2014. Of course, low supplies translate into higher prices, motivating producers to expand, and currently there are over 7% more beef cows in the U.S. than during the low point in 2014. Last January showed signs that the expansion of the beef herd was leveling off, and recent reports suggest that appears to remain the case. USDA's cattle inventory report pegs the total number of cattle and calves on July 1st at 103 million head, just slightly above last July's inventory of 102.9 million head, and fairly in line with pre-report expectations. All cows and heifers that have calved total 41.4 million head, just about 0.5% below last July, which is driven by 1% fewer beef cows, as milk cows are about 0.5% higher than last July. Beef and milk replacement heifers remain essentially unchanged from last year, while the category of other heifers weighing 500 pounds and up is 1% higher compared to expectations of 3.2% higher, which seems to suggest that producers are not really expanding their herds, but also may not be cutting back as much as anticipated either. Same weight category steers are 2% higher, and bulls are even with last July. The number of calves under 500 pounds is down slightly. With somewhat fewer cows and heifers calved, the USDA has revised downward its January estimate of the 2020 calf crop to 35.8 million head, so that consistent with pre-report expectations, it is now 1% below last year's level. This may help hold down the number of animals on feed and beef production for the remainder of 2020 and into next year. USDA's July cattle on feed report indicates 11.4 million head on feed, or just about 0.4% less than in July of 2019, consistent with expectations that it would be on par. In June, feedlots placed 2% more cattle than a year ago and marketed 1% more animals. Each of those numbers was within the pre-report expected ranges, but somewhat lower than those ranges' midpoints. The slightly lower number of cattle on feed reflects 1.5% fewer heifers and 0.3% more steers than a year ago. Even so, heifers still comprise over 38% of the cattle currently in feedlots, as compared to only around 31 to 33% during much of the last expansion. So this is additional evidence that the breeding herd is leveling off, or at least not expanding. Given the inventory and cattle on feed numbers, beef production is anticipated to be no more than 1% higher this year than last, and then drop 2% next year. In terms of domestic demand, per capita beef consumption is expected to remain at about 58 pounds per person in 2020 and drop to 56 pounds per person next year. Meanwhile, given limitations due to packer closures, exports have taken a hit this year at 2.5% lower, but are expected to rebound 6% next year. U.S. trade agreements with China and Mexico and Canada over the last year should help to bolster exports, provided containment of the coronavirus limits packer closures and adverse effects on economic growth. All things considered, prices for the next 4 quarters are likely to follow similar seasonal patterns as in prior years, albeit at lower levels. Slaughter steer prices are forecast to average respectively about $99 and $110 a hundredweight for the last 2 quarters of 2020, and then $114 and $101 a hundredweight for the first 2 quarters of 2021, respectively. For 600 to 700 pound feeder steers, prices are forecast to average about $146 and $148 a hundredweight for the last 2 quarters of this year, and then $141 and $137 a hundredweight in the first 2 quarters of next year. Again, some of the major factors that could result in still lower prices are uncertainty surrounding trade and the coronavirus. If the virus continues to have negative effects on economic growth, that could depress both domestic and export beef demand, putting further downward pressure on prices. For the University of Illinois and Western Illinois University, I'm Jason Franken.